Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, dark ocean. The water stretches endlessly into the horizon, merging with the night sky. You can't see what lies beyond the waves, but you feel the pull of curiosity and the chill of fear. What if you stepped into that darkness? Would it swallow you whole, or might there be something waiting on the other side? This is how humanity has faced death for millennia, an abyss we cannot illuminate, a mystery that both terrifies and mesmerizes. But what if death isn't an end at all? What if it's a threshold, a door to something we've never dared to imagine? Let's begin with a simple question. Why does the idea of death frighten us so deeply? Is it the loss of control, the uncertainty of what comes next? Or is it the haunting possibility that everything we are, our memories, loves, fears, might simply vanish? To explore this, we must first confront the oldest and most universal human fear, the fear of the unknown. Consider a child afraid of the dark. The darkness itself isn't dangerous. It's the absence of light, the absence of information. Our minds, wired to seek patterns and certainty, recoil from the void. Death is the ultimate darkness. It offers no answers, no maps, no promises. Ancient myths tried to fill this void with stories of underworlds, rebirth, or celestial realms. Philosophers, from Socrates to Kierkegaard, grappled with it through logic and faith. Yet even now, in our age of science and reason, death remains the one experience we cannot truly know until we face it, and by then, it's too late to report back. Here's the paradox. If death is truly the end, a state of non-existence, then why does the idea of it disturb us? After all, we didn't fear the billions of years before we were born. As the philosopher Epicurus argued, death is nothing to us, for when we exist, death is not, and when death exists, we are not. Yet this logical conclusion rarely comforts us. Why? Because the human mind struggles to conceptualize nothingness. We are storytellers, meaning makers. To imagine our own absence feels like a plot hole in the narrative of existence. This tension between logic and emotion lies at the heart of our fear. Science tells us consciousness is a product of the brain, a flickering flame that goes out when the body fails. But what if that's not the whole story? Cultures worldwide have proposed alternatives, souls, reincarnation, quantum immortality. These ideas persist not because they're provable, but because they offer something more satisfying than a void, a way to keep the story going. Yet even these theories raise unsettling questions. If death isn't the end, what is it? A transition? A transformation? And if so, who decides where we go or what we become? The uncertainty itself becomes a kind of existential vertigo. We cling to life not just because we enjoy it, but because it's the only reality we've ever known. To let go would mean surrendering to a mystery that defies all understanding. Take a moment to think about this. What if our fear of death isn't about death at all? What if it's really a fear of losing the self, the you that reads these words, remembers your first love, worries about tomorrow? If death isn't the end, does the self survive? Or does it dissolve, like a drop of water returning to the ocean? These questions have no easy answers, but they lead us to our next destination. If death is a door, what lies beyond it? To explore this, we'll turn to one of philosophy's most daring theories, the idea that consciousness might transcend the physical body, a concept that challenges everything science tells us about life and death. Picture a candle flame. You watch it dance, casting light and shadow, alive with movement. Now imagine blowing it out. Where does the flame go? Does it vanish into nothingness? Or does it transform, merging with the air, becoming heat, energy, something less visible but still present? This is the heart of our next question. If consciousness is like that flame, could it persist in some form after the body, the candle, is gone? For centuries, philosophers and mystics have proposed that consciousness might not be tethered to the physical world. The most famous advocate of this idea was René Descartes, who claimed, "I think, therefore I am." He saw the mind as a separate entity from the body, a res cogitans, thinking thing, distinct from the res extensa, physical matter. But if the mind is truly immaterial, how does it interact with the body? Descartes suggested the pineal gland as a meeting point, though even he admitted this was speculative. Today, neuroscience dismisses dualism, pointing to the brain's neurons and synapses as the sole source of consciousness. Yet the mystery remains. Why does it feel like something to be alive? Why does a bundle of firing cells create the vivid, private world of your thoughts and emotions? This is called the hard problem of consciousness, a term coined by philosopher David Chalmers. Science can explain how the brain processes information, but not how it generates subjective experience. Some thinkers, like those in the panpsychism movement, argue that consciousness isn't a product of the brain at all. It's a fundamental feature of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. In this view, every particle has a tiny spark of awareness. When organized into complex systems like brains, these sparks coalesce into the rich inner lives we know. If true, death might be less like a flame going out and more like a drop of water rejoining the ocean. But let's step back. Near-death experiences, NDEs, offer tantalizing, if controversial, glimpses into this possibility. People who've been clinically dead describe floating above their bodies, moving through tunnels of light, or encountering deceased loved ones. Skeptics argue these are hallucinations caused by oxygen deprivation or firing neurons. Yet the consistency of these accounts across cultures is striking. A farmer in rural India and a CEO in New York might describe eerily similar journeys. Are these stories mere artifacts of a dying brain or fragments of a deeper truth? Here's where things grow paradoxical. If consciousness exists independently of the brain, why does brain damage alter personality, memory, or awareness? A stroke can erase a lifetime of memories. A drug can warp perception. This seems to prove the brain is the source of consciousness. But what if the brain isn't a generator? It's a receiver. Think of a radio picking up signals from invisible waves. Damage the radio and the music distorts, but the broadcast continues. This transmission theory of consciousness, favored by some mystics and quantum theorists, suggests death might simply mean tuning out of one frequency and into another. Take a moment to think about this. If your consciousness is eternal, what does that mean for you? Would you retain your identity, your memories, your sense of self? Or would you dissolve into something boundless and impersonal, like a character, stepping out of a story and into the blank page? The terror of death isn't just about endings. It's about losing the thread of who we are. This leads us to a profound crossroads. If the self can survive death, what defines it? Is it memory, sensation, a soul? Or is the self an illusion, a temporary pattern in the cosmic tapestry? To explore this, we'll delve into one of philosophy's oldest thought experiments, a puzzle that questions whether any of us remain the same person from moment to moment. Think of a river. You step into it once, then again years later. Is it the same river? The water has changed, the banks have eroded, yet we still call it by the same name. Now imagine applying this question to yourself. Are you the same person? Who began reading this video's title minutes ago? Your cells have aged, your thoughts have shifted, yet you feel a thread of continuity. This puzzle, the paradox of personal identity, holds the key to understanding why the fear of death feels so personal, so visceral. Let's explore this with a thought experiment. Imagine a ship, the Argo, sails on a long voyage. Over time, every plank, nail, and sail is replaced. When it returns, is it still the Argo? The ancient Greeks called this the ship of Theseus paradox. Now take it further. If you collected the original discarded planks and rebuilt the ship, which one is the true Argo? Philosophers like John Locke use such metaphors to question identity. He argued that what makes us us isn't our physical body, but our memories and psychological continuity. But what happens when those memories fade or our beliefs change? Are we still the same person? Modern science deepens the mystery. The atoms in your body are entirely replaced every 7 to 10 years. Your childhood self is physically gone. Even your brain's neural pathways rewire with every new experience. If you're a constantly changing pattern, where is the self to fear for? Buddhism embraced this idea millennia ago, teaching anatta, the doctrine of no self. It suggests that clinging to a fixed identity is the root of suffering, including the fear of death. But if there's no permanent self, what is it that we're afraid of losing? The answer might lie in the stories we tell ourselves. We construct a narrative of me, a character with a past, present, and future. Death threatens to end that story mid-sentence. Yet if the self is an illusion, death becomes less about annihilation and more about the dissolution of a character in a grander tale. The philosopher Derek Parfit likened this to a relay race. Consciousness passes the baton from one moment to the next, creating the illusion of a single runner. Death, then, is simply the final handoff. But to whom or what? Here's where the paradox sharpens. If the self is fluid, why does death feel so catastrophic? Because the story matters to us. Even if it's a construct, it's the only lens through which we experience existence. A character in a novel might be fictional, but their hopes and fears feel real within the story's confines. Similarly, our fear of death isn't trivialized by the self's impermanence. It's amplified by the intimacy of the narrative we've lived. Take a moment to think about this. If the self is a story, who is the storyteller? And if the story ends, does the storyteller vanish or continue in another form? This uncertainty echoes through every culture's myths. Hinduism speaks of reincarnation, where the soul adopts new roles. Secular thinkers propose legacy, living on through art, ideas, or DNA. But these are still stories, attempts to outrun the void. What if death isn't an end to the self, but a revelation of its true nature? Imagine waking from a dream. The dream characters fade, but the awareness that witnessed them remains. Some non-dual philosophies, like Advaita Vedanta, argue that consciousness itself is the only reality, and that our individual selves are fleeting waves in an eternal ocean. If so, death might be the wave realizing it's the ocean. But how do we reconcile this with the raw human terror of non-existence? The contradiction is haunting. Logically, the self may be an illusion. Emotionally, it's the core of our being. This tension forces us to confront a deeper question. Is fear of death a mistake or a necessary part of being alive? To explore this, we'll turn to our final concept, one that bridges ancient wisdom and modern science, offering a surprising perspective on how to face the unknown. Imagine gazing at a starry sky. Each twinkling light is a sun, some long dead, their glow still traveling across millennia to reach your eyes. You are, in that moment, both impossibly small and deeply connected to the vastness of existence. This duality, the fragility of a single life against the backdrop of eternity, captures the final thread of our exploration. If death is inevitable, how do we reconcile our fear with the possibility of meaning? Let's begin with an ancient practice, memento mori, Latin for remember you must die. Stoic philosophers wore skull rings. Medieval monks kept hourglasses on their desks. These weren't morbid gestures, but tools for clarity. By confronting death, they sought to amplify life's value. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Yet this raises a question. If death gives life meaning, does fearing it undermine that purpose, or does the fear itself sharpen our appreciation? Modern existentialism takes this further. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that life has no inherent meaning. We must create it ourselves. Death, in this view, is the ultimate deadline. It forces us to choose, to act, to define ourselves before the curtain falls. But what if death isn't the end? Would immortality drain life of its urgency, its sweetness? The Spanish philosopher Miguel de Unamuno called this the tragic sense of life, the tension between our hunger for eternity and the fleetingness of existence. Science, too, grapples with this balance. Biologists note that death is evolution's engine. Without it, there's no room for new life, no adaptation, no progress. Even stars die to scatter the elements of future worlds. Yet this cosmic perspective feels cold when applied to human loss. We are, as the poet Rilke wrote, the bees of the invisible, collecting moments of love and wonder, knowing the hive will one day vanish. Here lies the paradox. Fear of death can paralyze or motivate. It can trap us in anxiety or propel us toward purpose. Studies in terror management theory show that reminders of mortality drive people to cling to cultural beliefs, create art, or seek legacy. But they also fuel greed, prejudice, and denial. The challenge isn't to eliminate fear, it's to befriend it, to let it remind us of what matters without letting it dictate our steps. Take a moment to think about this. What if death's uncertainty is its greatest gift? If we knew for certain what lay beyond heaven, rebirth, nothingness, would life lose its mystery? The not knowing forces us to live as if every choice matters while leaving room for awe. Like a detective solving a case they know will never close, we gather clues, love, beauty, curiosity, and trust the journey itself is the answer. Now, let's circle back to where we began, the ocean of the unknown. Science, philosophy, and spirituality are all maps drawn by explorers who dared to sail beyond the horizon. Some maps contradict others, none are complete. But perhaps the point isn't to reach a destination. It's to sail with courage, to wonder at the depths, and to find peace in the voyage. Quantum physics offers a curious metaphor here. In the double-slit experiment, particles behave as waves or particles, depending on whether we observe them. Reality, it seems, is shaped by attention. Could death be similar, a transition shaped by how we face it? Indigenous traditions often speak of death as a return to the land, ancestors, or stardust. These aren't answers, but invitations to see, endings as part of a larger rhythm. In the end, fear of death may be inseparable from being alive. It's the shadow cast by the light of consciousness. But shadows aren't enemies, they're proof of the light. To fear death is to love life fiercely, imperfectly, humanly. And if death isn't the end, then perhaps it's not a threat, but a continuation of the mystery we've been navigating all along. As we close, let's return to the stars. Their light reaches us long after they're gone, a reminder that existence outlives its sources. Whether our consciousness fades or transforms, whether the self endures or dissolves, one truth remains. We are here, now, part of a story older than memory. And that story is still being written. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, consider this not as an ending, but as a gentle surrender to the unknown. Let the questions linger. Let the fear soften. And remember, the very fact that you can ponder these mysteries is a kind of miracle, a spark in the dark, echoing across the infinite.